Welcome to Purpose. I'm your host, Corie Clark. I'm just a normal girl who decided to go for it. I created a thriving business from the ground up without sacrificing my sanity, and I believe that you can do the same. You were created on purpose, for a purpose, and I fully believe you can turn that purpose into profit. Each week, I'm going to bring you practical advice to help you live your life and grow your business on purpose. Welcome to another episode of Purpose. I'm your host, Corie Clark, and this is actually the last episode with the podcast being named Purpose with Corie Clark. Next week, we have a special announcement. We have a new podcast name. We have 5 amazing episodes dropping. If you want to get in on all the action and you want sneak peeks of those episodes, if you want a sneak peek of the new title and all of the new artwork, then go ahead and head on over to corieclark.com/community. This is my free community for everyone who listens to the show, and we talk about the podcast and other business tips. And it's just a great place for you to get connected with other women who are listening to the show and who are like-minded and purpose-driven like you are. So that link was corieclark.com/community. Okay, so today's episode, it is a good one, and it's actually about podcasting. So if you've ever thought about having a podcast, this is a great episode, but it's also a great episode if you have a product or service to sell, and even if you don't want your own podcast. We talk about how to get on other podcasts to build brand awareness. So before we jump into the episode, though, I did want to let you guys know that we have opened the doors to the Purpose Babe Society. It's only open for a few days, so if you listen to this episode on the day it drops, you should be good to go. We're closing the doors this coming Thursday. So go to corieclark.com/VIP. We have some amazing bonuses, brand new bonuses that I've never offered before. And next month, we are going to be learning all about Pinterest. I have been making some tweaks to my Pinterest strategy, and I am going to be doing a big training next month in the society on Pinterest. And so if you want to be part of that training, you need to get into the Purpose Babe Society this week before the doors close. And that can be found at corieclark.com/VIP. Okay, so this is Kelly Glover, and she does podcast guest strategy. She's booked thousands of podcast interviews. She's the founder of the Talent Squad and works with entrepreneurs, authors, and experts. Kelly's expertise comes from 18 years working in the media. She has been a celebrity interviewer, talent agent, radio host, and podcast producer. Kelly is here to teach you how being a podcast guest can benefit your brand and your business. Learn how to distill your core message, package your expertise, effectively pitch the media, and nail your guest interviews for maximum results. So like I said, even if you don't want to have your own podcast, this episode is great and gives you some insight into pitching yourself to be on other people's podcasts. So here we go with my interview with Kelly Glover.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much for coming on the show today. I'm so excited to get to know you a little bit better and share you with my audience.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you, Corie.
Awesome. Well, why don't you go ahead and give my listeners a little introduction? Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and what you do.
Sure. So I am an agent at the Talent Squad. I am in Australia. You might be able to tell that by the accent. However, I actually did go to college in Ohio. I was an intern in Hollywood. I spent years living in Los Angeles. And what I do now is I'm a podcast guest booking agent. So we book podcast tours for entrepreneurs and authors.
Awesome. I love it. So now how long were you out in the States for then?
Oh, I've been back and forth for about 20 years. So I went to college back in 2000. So
Okay.
that was 3 years in Ohio. I spent 5 years in Los Angeles. I've lived in New York. I've been all over the place. So I am in Australia for lockdown at the moment. So Australia said, okay, if you're Australian, you got to come back. So I'm okay. That's where I am. But because of podcasting, which is amazing, I'm able to work from anywhere. So it really hasn't affected me very much because you can do podcasts from anywhere.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's the beauty of
Oh,
being in the online space right now is, it really hasn't affected us too much besides the fact that we can't actually see our friends, but our schedule is still very much the same. The things we're doing is very much the same. So that hasn't been too much of a transition for us.
yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. So what got you into podcasting and actually tell us a little bit about how you started your business?
Yeah, so I have a background in media and entertainment. That's what I did at university. I was an intern for Miramax. I was an entertainment reporter doing all the celebrity interviews on the red carpet and then transitioned to radio. So I had a syndicated radio show. So that's my radio background. And when I moved back to Los Angeles, I wasn't able to get a job in radio with this accent. I completely misread the market. And podcasting was out at that time. So I started writing show notes. I started booking guests. And then I quickly realized, actually, I love this more than radio. So something that seemed bad at the time actually was a gift. I got into podcasting, haven't looked back. I got in quite early. So sometimes you're in a situation you don't really know why and you think you failed, but you actually haven't. It's a gift and you're ahead of the game. So that's what happened to me. And I could not feel happier or luckier or more fulfilled in podcasting.
Yeah, I love that. I love when you just kind of end up finding your way through a form that you didn't even realize you wanted. You know what I mean? It's like, so you were doing, where you were doing podcast show notes and bookings, I'm guessing, for other people.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I started, and then I actually moved back to Australia to get weight loss surgery. So that was something I needed to do back in Australia because of American healthcare system and different things. So again, I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I just have a belief in things will turn out. And if I have a good gut feeling, I will follow it. So I came back here and that's when I got a job as a podcast producer for a women's network. So I was doing that. And then the company I was working for took their staff in-house. So then I thought, well, okay, now's the time to open up my own agency because contracts were ending. And I thought I'm not responsible, but I'm at the behest of other people. I don't have no control over my own destiny. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, well, I'll be the one in charge and I'll be able to look after the client. So that's when I started my own company. And again, it's not something you kind of are seeking out, but you're put in a situation where that is the choice, and it ends up being the best choice, which it's happened so many times to me. I'm like, okay, well, let's just roll with it and see what happens. I know things will turn out okay.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You have to listen to that gut instinct sometimes, because I feel like that's something I've learned over the years is a lot of times the experts might give me some sort of advice or opinion, but it always comes down to when I listen to my gut and trust my instinct, I end up following the right path. So.
And I also trust the skills that I've been developing. It's not like I've just jumped into it and, oh, this is a great idea. It's something I've been working towards without knowing it for 20 years. So I've been building on the skills, building on the skills, building on the skills, building on the skills. So something seems to show up at the time when you're ready and you have actually been preparing for it, but you just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, I love that. Now, how do you, in your business, so you run an agency, correct?
Yes, the talent
yeah. And so what kind of things are you doing? How are you helping podcasters get their shows out there?
So we book podcast tours for entrepreneurs. So people come to us and say, hey, I want to be a guest on podcasts. Are you able to book that for us? So we help with their positioning, with their messaging, with making sure they're ready to pitch the media. Then we pitch them out and then they do the interviews. So it's that element of an agency. And something else I also do is help people with personal branding quite a lot, because what we've discovered over the years is people come and say, hey, I want to be a guest on podcasts, but then that's kind of step 6. They don't have all the steps before that ready to go. I'm like, okay, well, what's your area of expertise? Who are you speaking to? Do you have your headshots ready? Do you have your messaging ready? What questions or topics do you want to speak about? Let's have a whip around the internet. What does it look like? Like, what's your Facebook, Instagram? How's everything looking? And then we realize that it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. So we need to come in and do a bit of a Marie Kondo of everything and make sure everything looks nice, do a bit of a renovation, and then take them to market. So often we find that people, yes, they're an expert in their field, no doubt. We know, you know what it's like that 20 years of preparation. You know what you're talking about. There's no doubt in that. But we just need to, instead of present you in, say, a brown paper lunch bag, we need to put you in shiny, beautiful, thick paper with a gorgeous bow. And that's the box that you come in, even though, yes, it is the exact same gift on the inside and you have that expertise. But you're going to, as a show host, which you would know you get pitched all the time, you're going to want that shiny, beautiful box with the lovely bow to present to your listeners, as opposed to a brown paper bag, even if it is the same gift.
Yeah.
So we work a lot with personal branding with our clients to get them ready, which also serves them across everything in their business.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And that's what that's what I tell the ladies in my coaching program all the time. It's like, you have a brand. Like, if you're trying to sell one service, but someone else is trying to sell the same exact thing, the only thing that's going to set you apart is your brand and, your personality and the experience. So I love that you add that into your package, because it's really not about just getting your podcast out to the masses. It's about really displaying who you are.
Yeah, we've moved into doing that separately as well, because we find that people, they may not want the service of, yeah, we want to be on podcasts, but we don't have the budget for that. We want to do that ourselves because we teach people how to pitch themselves. So maybe they want the branding element, and then they go and pitch themselves, whether it be them, their team member, or a virtual assistant, or whatever it is. And when I talk about personal branding, I like to think of Starbucks. You've got a white coffee cup, or you've got a Starbucks coffee cup. That Starbucks coffee cup is a $5 cup of coffee. The white unbranded one is maybe $1.25, $2. That's the difference between branding. And I'll tell you, the coffees I buy, they're like $6 because I'm like, buy the fancy one, and I'm more than happy to pay that. And I love Starbucks. That's the difference in branding.
Yeah, I love that. That is a great example. So now, how important do you feel, since podcasting is, where you're at, what if some of my listeners, they haven't started a podcast yet, maybe they're thinking about it. How important do you think it is to have a podcast right now, and who do you think they're for?
I think a lot of it comes down to asking yourself a lot of questions up front. Podcasts are excellent, no doubt. Is there a podcast for everyone? Yes, there is. Can you make one and get one up and running in 24 hours? Yes, you can. Is it an affordable thing to do for everybody? Yes, it is. But the question is on the other side of all that is there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of work, as you would know, as a podcast producer. So who are you talking to? And what do you want them to do as a result of listening to the podcast? Like, why are you doing it? What's the purpose? And what are you going to do with it once it's out there? Because there is the booking guests. There is the doing the research on the guests. There is buying the tech. Then there's the recording. Then there's the editing. Then there's the show notes. Then there's posting it. Then there's all the graphics. And it sounds like I'm going on and saying a lot, because there's a lot of parts to it. And do you have an audience already? Or are you building one from scratch, and do people want what you're putting out? So it's sort of really assessing, going, okay, I want to do this. That's awesome. But why, and what's going to happen from that? Because we find there's a thing called pod fade, again, as you would know. And that's when people get excited. They want to do a podcast, and they do maybe 3 or 6 episodes. And they're like, this sucks. This is a lot of work. I don't want to keep going with this, and fade out. And rightly so. It's a lot of work. I love it. It's fun. So do you have to do a podcast a week for the rest of your life, 52 episodes? No, you don't. You could do a 6-episode series once a year. You could do once a month, 12 episodes. So it doesn't have to look like, you don't have to play by the rules because you're making it up yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. And so do you feel like, because I have my opinion, but I do want to hear yours, as far as the content that we put out there as entrepreneurs, as creators, there's all these different ways to put out content, podcasting, video, blog posts, all that kind of stuff. Do you feel like podcasting is like the best? Do you feel like it is something that people should pursue if they are thinking about it?
I think that I love podcasting because you can break it up and use it in so many different ways. But if you're a nervous speaker and you don't have the commitment for it, and it's not going to be for you. So is it for everybody? No. However, I do think it provides the most bang for your buck because you can turn that into other media, whereas other media can't turn into podcasts. So if you do a podcast, you can turn that into a book. You can turn that into a blog post. You can turn that into an Instagram. You can pull that and put it into a live, but all those other mediums you can't make into a podcast. So a podcast can turn into 30 different pieces of media. And also it's, I would say it's very effective because it's what you can do stuff with podcasts you can't do with other mediums. So it's one-to-one. You can hear now from the tone of my voice if you like me, if you believe what I'm saying, if I'm full of it, or if I actually know what I'm speaking about. You'll either love that I'm super excited or you'll think that I'm crazy. Either way, it works for both of us because you'll love me or you hate me. So it's polarizing, which is perfect for both of us because we're not wasting either of our times. And also, people listen to podcasts as a whole. Like you say, I'm in the middle of reading a book. I'm in the middle of listening to a podcast. You don't say, I'm in the middle of watching a Facebook Live. I'm in the middle of reading a blog post. You might read a headline and move on. Mm-hmm. But if you're listening to a podcast, you will, and on the way to the store, you'll listen to those 10 minutes it takes you to get to the store. And when you get back in that car, you'll listen to the rest of it. So I think it is a one-to-one. You get a lot more information out of it. And they're highly practical learning. It is infotainment. I think the word is completely dorky and I dislike the word, but it is absolutely accurate. And I also can't think of a better word.
Yes.
So people listen to podcasts because they want to learn something and be able to do something at the end of the time, that 30 minutes. So I think that do I think I don't think it's an answer for everything. I really don't think there's one, this is it, this is all you need to do. Yeah. But it is certainly my preference and you can turn it into other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my preference too, because it's easier for me to just sit and, if I have something I want to share with my audience, I can just bust out a bonus episode instead of trying to type up a blog post. And then I can turn it into a blog post, and I'm killing two birds with one stone. And
there's two types of preferences. There's the what do you prefer as the creator, but then there's the what do you prefer as the consumer. So you've got to think in both ways. But again, you can turn that as a creator, you can put that content out in audio, in podcasts, and then you can turn it into other ways that people like to consume. So that's the beauty of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you brought up that I'm in the middle of a podcast, just like you would say, I'm in the middle of a book. And actually, people probably finish more podcast episodes than they actually finish books. I mean, how many unfinished books are sitting on people's bookshelves?
Absolutely. And it's a standalone 30-minute to 60-minute property, as opposed to like a blog post. You don't always read it. You might just catch the headlines. I think you're just scrolling through really quickly, madly with your eyes. But I think that podcasts are more, I feel like you take more of it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not going to go back and read a blog post again, but I will go back and listen to a podcast again.
Yes, exactly. And you do, like you said, you get to know the person, you hear their voice, and that really does help you decide if you like them or not. And usually if you like them a lot and you're going to keep listening, for a reason.
Oh, I've listened to podcasts and thought, oh, I like that person. Yep, they know what they're talking about. Then I'll go and check them out on their website. And I've made a decision, or if I see a course, I already feel like I know them and know what they're talking about, so I trust them. So often I've gone and downloaded the thing or bought the course or listened to more things. I think it's a really good way to get people into your ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And I think it really does expedite the know, like, and trust factor. And I feel like it doesn't have tricks. I don't like being tricked into things. Like I said, right now you like me or you dislike me, and either way it works for both of us. Like, that's great, because I want people that like me and believe me and trust me and know that I know what I'm talking about. And if that's not me for you, you should find that person that is for you. Therefore, it's a win for both of us.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, just a side note, I love listening to your voice. So I think it's funny that people that wasn't like working for radio here, because I love listening to accents. I have a lot of friends from Australia, so I'm used to it, but I think I like your voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah, here I sound the same as everybody else. They're like, stop talking, be quiet. No, sorry.
Oh, that's hilarious. So when someone comes to you, they're a new client, or, you know, they're looking for some help, what do you see people making? Like, what kind of mistakes are people making when they are trying to pitch themselves to be on other shows?
Yeah, the biggest mistake I see people make when they want to pitch themselves to shows is go in and talk about how great they are, and it's all about them and not about the audience of the show, and that they don't actually look at the back catalogue of the show or really assess the show correctly. They just go in going, I want to be on a show, this is all about me. Well, so what? Who cares? It's actually not about you. So when you're pitching a show, I'm not even pitching you. I'm actually pitching the audience, and you're the gatekeeper of the audience. So it's about, what does the audience want? What do they need to learn? If you had someone on last week talking about getting booked on podcasts, I've got no business pitching you about talking about getting booked on podcasts, because you've already covered that with your audience, and it shows you that I haven't even looked at who you've spoken to already. Now, that doesn't mean I can't come in and pitch you. It just means I have to pitch something counter to that. Or something that builds on that isn't what's already been said. So it's paying attention to who's been on the show, and then knowing what the audience wants, or seeing a gap in there. Like, oh, okay, they've spoken about that. I know who the audience is, or I think I know who it is. I'm going to come in and offer this because I think that will really help them and they'll want to learn something. So podcast guesting is about giving and offering education and solutions and solving people's problems, instead of, I've got a book and I want to come on your show and talk about my book to your audience. Thanks.
Yeah. And I can definitely like attest to that. It's so true. When I get pitched and it's somebody that is like, I have this, I want to promote this. I honestly, like, just immediately am kind of like, I don't really want you on my show if that's why you want to be on my show. And so it's so important to actually like take some time. If you haven't listened to any of the episodes, especially listen to a couple of the episodes and see what their vibe is, and if you can offer some sort of service to their audience. And I think that's so important. I haven't even really pitched myself to other podcasts, just because as my business took off, people were asking me to be on their show. And so I was a guest a ton, because people wanted to hear my story. And then now that I've started my podcast, it's more about, who I'm going to have on my show. And so I've technically never even pitched myself, but I really like this advice, because I would like to be on other people's shows more often.
I think one of the mistakes that people make is thinking, I want to go on a podcast and I want to sell my stuff and I want people to buy my stuff. That's not what it's about. And there's a lot of agencies around saying, you'll go on here and you'll make X sales and X this and X that. Podcasting is actually a positioning play. It's not about sales at all. It's about, it's also about personal branding. So I think that if you think that you're going on a show to sell a book, sell a product, sell a course, I think that's really the wrong way to think about it. And it should be with a giving mentality and a teaching mentality. So it's really, you need to go on there and expect no one will go to your website. No one's going to buy your thing. Like, that's the expectation. That's not going to happen. But if you go in with that, then everything is a gift instead of an expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That is so true, because you will get people who are interested in you. You'll get people who want to learn more from you and follow you and buy from you. But if you're going in with the intention of just to sell, you're doing a disservice to the person who's hosting you. You're doing a disservice to their audience as well. And I can tell when I'm listening to a podcast. and the person is just so passionate about what they do and they just want to share and they want to teach. And those are the podcasts that I love the most, and you walk away and those are the ones you go back and listen to.
Yeah. The way I say, if you want advertising, then buy an ad.
Yeah.
It's not an infomercial. And I think that's where people go wrong. They think that it's not an infomercial.
Yes. That is
That's what you want. That's fine. Buy a Facebook ad, buy a spot, buy a sponsorship, if that's what you're after, that is totally fine. I absolutely get it.
Yeah.
But just think of it in a different way. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, oh my gosh, I have just I could listen to you talk about this all day long because
I could talk about it all day long.
Like I said, I've never pitched myself. So what are some other things, do you see anything trending with podcasts? And I feel like more and more people are starting them, which I think is amazing because I feel like it is a great platform to be growing your audience on and to be sharing your content with your audience. Do you see any trends? Do you see anything changing in the podcast area?
Podcasting is changing all the time, which is something that I absolutely love about it. And one of the things that I've seen in the last few years, if people have clued into the idea of batching. So where it used to be, I'll do a weekly episode and it's a weekly episode for the rest of my life and people lose steam. They say, okay, well, I might batch once a quarter for a couple of days and get 12 episodes out once a quarter. So I think that that's something that you need to be mindful of when you're pitching, because it comes with it's ebbs and flows, especially it might be different now during COVID, but at the end of the year, it's very difficult to get bookings because people are already in October, November, batching out the rest of the year and they kind of don't come back till mid-January. So it's just something to think about with the pitch. There is a pitch cycle in podcasting and it's different to other mediums. So whereas with mainstream media, it's either a 24-hour news cycle or it's a radio show or it's a magazine. They've got very definitive cycles of timing. And podcasting doesn't, but it's developing one. But every podcast is its individual media outlet. So you will never know. There will never be a rule of thumb on everything anyway, because everyone's running their own show.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very true because I have been on other podcasts where they're like, oh, your show is coming out in 2 months. I'm like, wow, good for you. I don't batch that much, but because I do like to share relevant content and I like to share what I'm inspired by. And so that's kind of how I do my show. But I do know there are shows where, you might not be on it for a couple months, which kind of goes back to the whole pitch thing or the selling on the show. If you go on just to sell, and then the show doesn't come out for a couple months, you might be past your launch that you were trying to promote.
Yeah, you need to consider that podcasts are evergreen content. And especially a lot of authors want to go on shows to promote the book. And now the other thing is timing. It is really a long play because they'll say, I've had this happen to me. I've got a text. I took a screenshot of it. Someone contacting me saying, hey, I've got my book coming out next week. Can I get on Joe Rogan? No, you can't. I'm sorry. First of all, it's coming out on Wednesday. That's not enough lead time. Second of all, it's Joe Rogan. Tell me how many podcasts you've been on. 0. That's not going to happen. And he said, that's fine. I'm happy to go on it 2 weeks after the launch. So it's having a little bit of a wet. And I'm like, well, still, that's you don't actually even have a website or Instagram yet. So I think there needs to be a little bit of an expectation on where you are in relation to the guest, the back catalogue of guests and the quality of the show. So for me, if I wanted to go on Joe Rogan, I'd want to do 100 interviews on other shows before and then have a pretty good following. So then I felt like I was in that league. So I think it's having a little bit of awareness and also knowing the lead time. So there's a few things in that as well, because even if it was Tom Cruise, whomever, you have to expect that show has already been booked out for a long time in advance. So if you're promoting a book or going on a book tour, you probably need to start organizing that 6 months in advance, because I could book it. I could start pitching today, get you booked next week or the week after. It might not get recorded for another 2 or 3 weeks. Then it might not go to air for another 3 months, or go to air, I say, get published. So the timeline is not TV where I want to be on a show on Tuesday. It goes out on, recorded on Tuesday, goes out on Tuesday. It could be you get pitched on Tuesday and it might not go out for 6 months. So if you do want to time a launch of some kind, first of all, you're making a request, not a demand. Like, oh, my book's coming out in March, that would be great. But then you really need to do that well in advance.
Yeah, I like that. Now, so you did mention, if you're wanting to get on like, Joe Rogan's show or someone that has like some status in the podcast space. And if you've never been on any other podcast, would that be your first step that you would tell people, is to really get themselves prepped by being on more shows?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't just go to the Olympics on the first run. You've been training and gone through the regionals, gone through the state, gone through the nationals. So I would get those runs on the board, because I would not want to mess that up. I would want to be a professional and make sure I knew what I was doing. Now, there are cases like if you climbed up Everest or were in a bank heist. I've been watching that show Money Heist recently. It's been making me think of it. Then yeah, you're sort of at the top of news. And then there are situations where that is no longer relevant. But I would want to make sure that I had runs on the board before I went there. And also, you can pitch them all you like. And if they say yes, amazing, that's fantastic. But it would also, as having been someone that's a producer, if someone's pitching me and I can't see what previous shows that they've been on, it's not likely that I'm going to book them, because the first thing I'm going to do is whip around all their social media. And that goes back to the personal branding that we were talking about before. If you don't have a website and you don't have an Instagram, and I can't see a track record or listen to you on a show that you've been on before to prove that you're a good interview, I'm not going to book you.
Yeah, that's great. Now, okay, so this is a question like now that I personally have, because I have been on a lot of podcasts, but I don't really have them anywhere. Is that something I should have on like a booking page or something?
Yeah, so at the Talent Squad, we make an online press kit for all our clients, and that's where you house your Media One sheet, all your approved headshots that you want to go out, because you don't really want someone like going through Instagram and picking a photo from 4 years ago that you now dislike. So you have and you want something high quality. And so you'd want your photos there. You'd want previous episodes there. You'd want your talking points there. You'd want any videos that you have. You could have a trailer there. So have everything on one page, and it's easily updatable as well. So if you change or add or delete a talking point, it's quite easy for you to go in there, and it makes it always live and always relevant, as opposed to a one sheet that you might have sent out. They might get to it 2 months later and you might have already changed your speaking topics. So we really, and then you can upload it as well. If you had a great interview that went live last week, you can just quickly add that in there, and when they visit the page, it's already there. So you don't have to have every interview you've ever done. You might just have the top 4, and then they're going to click, listen to you. Producers are very fast, and they get a lot of information in a very short period of time. So I can probably click through 4 interviews and get a lot more information about that person in 3 minutes than most people could by listening to the whole interview. So they will whip across that page and get so many pieces of information, and they'll make a decision very quickly, because they've done it and they know what they're looking for, and they know what pointers are for success. Also, it's a great place to put your credibility markers. A lot of people have done TED Talks these days, or TEDx talks. So you could have a TEDx talk. You could have, it's credibility markers. That's what the whole thing is, evidence.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. I'm definitely going to do that, because like I said, I would definitely like to be on more shows. As much as I love hosting my own show and interviewing people, I love being interviewed as well, and like you said, the more I do it, the easier everything comes to me. I remember the very first podcast episode I was ever going to be on as a guest when I first wrote my book, and I was scared to death. I was so scared, and I was just like nervous and shaky, and I hope I say the right thing. But I learned after that first episode, like, okay, it wasn't scary. It wasn't bad. It was actually really fun. And, now every single time I'm on one, it gets easier and easier to communicate and to share my story.
Yeah, so Corie, I equate it to being a guest at somebody else's party instead of throwing your own. When you throw your own party, you probably do it once a year. You've got to get all the catering, you've got to get all the guest lists, you've got to make all the food, you've got to look after, you've got to host it and do all the things. But if you go to somebody else's party, all you have to do is show up, eat their food, dance to the music, and then you leave and they have to do all the cleaning up. So your responsibility is to be an entertaining and fun guest and make sure you dress up and look nice and a good guest, but you don't have to wake up the next day and mop the floors and, clean up all the stuff and take the trash out. So I think, and you could go to a party a week for the rest of your life. You're totally fine. You can do that, but you can't throw a party a week for the rest of your life. So that's the way I look at it. And I'd much rather be a party guest than throw the party.
Yes.
Hey guys, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah, it's so right. I do love throwing a good party, but definitely not weekly.
Yeah. That's another way to think about it. And if you are thinking of starting a podcast, a great way to see what it's actually like is to go on the other side and be a guest, because every podcast you go on will have different systems, different processes. So you can see it from the other side and experience of what it's like to be a guest and pick the bits that you like and get rid of the bits that you don't like and make your own processes. So that's a really good way to ease into podcasting, is being a guest on other people's podcasts. And by the time you've done that podcast tour, or if you're doing it yourself, whatever, if you've been on, say, 5 podcasts, 10 podcasts, guess what? You've already automatically got 10 people that are likely to want to be guests on your shows.
True. That's very true.
It's just so great.
Mm-hmm. It is great.
So great.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, that if you're thinking of starting a podcast, to definitely get on other podcasts as well. I mean, that's why I started one, was after being a guest so many times, I was like, this is really fun. I want to have, guests on my show, and I want to be able to communicate with my audience in a way where I'm connecting with them in their ears. Like, my voice is in their ears, and I feel like it just helps you to connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, and on that way, when you have your own show, it's benefits for both. It really is. It's not one is better than the other. There's benefits of both, and it's reciprocation. Because if you have a show, you're able to get, say, we'll just use 52, like just a weekly as we've been using. That's 52 areas of expertise that you don't have. So you can teach your audience things that you don't necessarily have that expertise in, and they have access to all these people who know all these things that you don't necessarily know. How great is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Which is why I'm so excited.
I don't know every expertise on all that kind of stuff, but if I got someone and that's everything that they know, that they've been studying for 20 years, you better want them on my show.
Yeah, which is exactly why I was so excited to have you on my show, because I definitely am not an expert in podcasting, but I love it. And I hadn't had anybody on the show yet to talk about actually podcasting and pitching your podcast. And so I feel like this has just been so valuable, and I absolutely love everything that you're sharing with us.
Yeah, so I think there's 3 elements to our conversation, really, which is there's having your own show, absolutely doable. Is it a good idea? Yes, just ask yourself those questions. Being on other people's shows, whether that's hiring an agency or pitching yourself, and then making sure your personal brand is in order. So there's those 3 things, and I would suggest doing the personal branding element first. I think people think of it after they've developed a business, but they really should think about it first, while they're in there, and then doing the other elements.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I 100% agree, and I think that's great advice, is to start with that. And so, okay, how about, I have 2 questions that I always ask my guests, and it actually doesn't have anything to do with podcasting. But the first question is, I want to know from you, what does living a purposeful life mean to you?
It means waking up in the morning and knowing by the end of the day, you'll have made a difference in somebody's life. And for me, most of the time, it's someone I will never meet and never know what they end up doing. But I always believe that by the end of the day, I will have changed someone's life that I will never meet.
I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. Okay. And then what is one piece of advice that you would give to a new entrepreneur who is just starting out in the space? It doesn't have to be about podcasting, but just somebody who's going to start their own business. What's one piece of advice you have for them?
I would say there's a little trick that I use, and I don't know what it's called, but it's basically making yourself your own client and giving yourself a different name. So I'm Kelly Glover, the Talent Squad, but I would say Jenny. So because often you can't see the wood for the trees and help yourself, or you can't see how great you are sometimes. So I would be like, oh, well, Jenny's done this, this, and this, and this, and this. What would I say to Jenny if she had this problem? And then I'm able to give really good advice. And then because sometimes you can't take your own advice. So when you change your name and even just write it out, you can see things that you can't normally see. And that's just a little technique for, do I really want to do this business? What would I do? What should I do here? You just get stuck. But as soon as you flip the name to someone else, you can just always give the best advice ever. So that can help with making decisions on what kind of business should I do? What should I do here? What should I do there? Like when you're stuck in making decisions, what would you tell Jenny to do?
Yeah, I really like that actually, because I was just talking about that with my business coach. I'm like, how come I have this same problem that I can help my clients with, and now I have it?
Yeah, because I'm like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And then I change the name to whatever the name is, and I'll write it out. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I would tell that person to do. Bang, bang, bang. And you know what? That's the advice you should take, because your advice is usually pretty awesome.
Yeah. Wow. I really like that. I think that's like one of my favorite answers I've gotten for that question. That is great advice.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a thing. I don't know if it's a psychological. I've just made it up, and it works for me. And so I don't know if it's a thing, but it just works.
Well, yeah, you need to make it a thing. You need to coin that little phrase, name it, and sell it, because it's actually a really good, I really like that idea, and I'm definitely going to try it myself. So
great. Yeah. Tell me how it goes. See
I will. I'm for sure going to try it. I'll probably have to do it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise with us. This has just been so valuable. Can you share with us where my audience can find you?
Yes, kellyglover.com. That's KELLYGLOVER.com.
Okay, awesome. I will put that in the show notes, and I look forward to just learning more from you. I think you're amazing, and I'm so happy that we connected.
Thank you. Same. Absolutely the same. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening, you guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kelly. She's amazing. I will link to all of her information in the show notes, as well as my free community where you can find out all the details about next week's big podcast relaunch, and the link to join my Purpose Babe Society. Remember, doors close soon, so you are going to want to jump on that as soon as you finish listening to this episode. Have a great week, you guys, and I will be back here next week with a new name and 5 amazing episodes.